I'm Chef Gail Sokol and welcome to my kitchen. You are in for a treat today. We are making the yeastiest cinnamon rolls ever. You know, covered with that beautiful, yummy frosting that you just love oozing over the top of them. And then when you peel into them, they have layers of beautiful, mine anyway, brown sugar and cinnamon inside, loaded with butter and yumminess. Well, you're gonna wanna make these because I used to make these for my kids for years and years, and then they loved them so much, I even made them for my kids in my baking school. So I have been making these for most of my life actually, and they don't come out of a can, so you're gonna love them. So let's start by preparing our dry ingredients. This is a yeast spread, so it does take a little time, but not too long and well worth the effort. So in my electric mixer, I'm going to be putting 1 cup. We're going to build this dough a little bit more slowly, just so everything blends better. 1 cup of all-purpose flour. So I'm not putting all the flour I'm using in at once. I like to use a little white whole wheat flour. I'm going to use half a cup. Just gives like a little bit of a nutty quality and gives another dimension to the dough that I really like. Half a cup plus 2 tablespoons of granulated sugar, 2½ teaspoons of instant active yeast. That's not active dry. This is fast rising, instant active. This is the Arnold Schwarzenegger yeast. Very powerful. So each yeast granule actually can produce so much carbon dioxide, you actually use less of it than you would with active dry, and there's no proofing needed. So you put it right in with the dry ingredients. Easy peasy, right? Now, because I like a little puff, a little oomph, a little je ne sais quoi to my cinnamon rolls, I actually am adding 1½ teaspoons of baking powder. Yeah, I know, to a yeast spread, right? What? That's what I like to do. And ½ teaspoon of table salt. All going in there, and I whisk it because sometimes my paddle doesn't always do the trick. So I'm whisking just for a second. All right, once that is all whisked, I'm going to show you what I have here. These are my dry ingredients. My liquid ingredients. I have 6 tablespoons of unsalted butter. I love Cabot, which I softened, and then I put it in here so it would melt more easily with ½ cup of whole milk, or any type of milk that you like to use, and ½ cup of water. And I just let that melt so it's about 110 degrees Fahrenheit. You don't want to kill the yeast. The death point of yeast is about 138 to 140 degrees. So we don't even want to get close to that because we don't want our yeast to kick the bucket before it has time to go through the fermentation process. So I've added 3 large eggs, whole eggs. I'm going to whisk that in. All right, and again, you also don't want it too hot because you don't want to cook your eggs. So you're just going to whisk and let that sit there for a minute. So I'm going to put my paddle in. I start with my paddle, and I'm going to switch to the dough hook in a little while, but I start with my paddle because I think it blends yeast doughs better. This is known as a enriched or a sweet yeast dough. So it has eggs in it, it has butter in it, it has sugar in it. Very different than something like an Italian bread or a pizza dough that doesn't really have enriching ingredients. And now we're going to pour it in under low speed. Just keep pouring it in. Remember, we're building this little base dough, and then we're going to add more of our flour in a little while. But I really want to get these eggs and sugar fully incorporated so everybody rises and everyone is happy together in my yeast dough. And if you can see, I'm just going to whisk it. It's very liquidy. It's very soupy. And I'm going to add 3½ more cups of all-purpose flour. So come have a gander inside the bowl. So you can see it looks a little light brown because of the white whole wheat flour. I'm just going to give it a good go around my paddle. All right, and then I'm just going to slowly add that extra 3½ cups of all-purpose flour. Now, if you wanted to, you could add more white whole wheat flour if you wanted. Why do they call it white whole wheat flour? It's a little bit lighter. It's not as, you know, weedy. Some people don't like the weediness of a wheat flour, so they don't like the taste of it. But this is sort of a good happy medium. Look. So I'm just going to keep putting this in here. If it gets a little harder to put in, and it is, it's time to switch to the dough hook. So I got me hook, all right? And I'm going to switch it out. Some people start with the dough hook, and I find I can never get the batter to really mix very, very well. So I like to start like this, especially when I have enriching ingredients, like those eggs and the milk and the butter, okay? So I'm gonna swap that out, and then I'm gonna put my dough hook in, all right? Feel like Captain Hook? Get your dough hook in, and then continue to add. So your dough sort of speaks to you, right? Didn't you know that your dough talks to you? And it sort of tells you what it wants. And this dough was telling me it really needed to be switched to the dough hook. And that's what I'm doing. So I'm going to add the remainder of this flour. Sometimes if I see the dough is getting too dry, I will withhold some of the flour. Because the one thing I have learned is adding too much flour is really a death sentence to some yeast spreads. You really want them light and sort of puffy so that when they rise, they actually have, you know, the texture to rise. So here we go. I'm adding the whole thing, and I'm letting it go. So come on, come take a look in there. Doesn't look like much of a dough right now, but it will. All right, and then I always like to go, you know, in The Godfather they used to say, go to the mattresses. Well, I like to go to the workbench. I like to go to the work surface and get my dough out on the workbench and actually feel it with my hands. So let's do that. So let's get this out. You can see it's formed a dough. All right, and that really was not a hard dough to form. And it's surrounding itself on this dough hook, but we're gonna get it off of here, all right? And I need a tool that I don't have right now. It is my bench scraper. Got it. So I'm going to take all this out, this loveliness out. And your dough should feel smooth and elastic. And we're going to get it to feel smooth and elastic, because watch what I'm going to do. You're going to flip it over on itself. Flip it over. Flip it over. And you can see it looks shaggy. I've said this in a lot of my yeast doughs before. In the beginning it looks shaggy because the gluten-forming proteins, which are forming as you mix. Remember, gluten only forms when water-based ingredients are mixed with wheat flour. And we have two types of wheat flour in here. We have all-purpose and we have white whole wheat. So we are going to start kneading this. You can easily do this if you have trouble hand kneading. I always find it very, very therapeutic. But if you don't like to hand knead, and I do recommend that you learn to do it, it's very like a Zen thing, sort of like my yoga. You can actually leave it in the bowl and leave your dough hook in there. See how it's coming together? And it feels smooth, elastic, slightly sticky, but not to the point where I really needed more flour. And look, Mom, nothing on my hands. You don't want any dough to be that gooey on your hands. If you do, always have a tiny bit of flour ready to sprinkle. But in my experience, adding less flour is better. All right, so see how I'm kneading it? It's really coming together. Looking good. Looking good, beautiful dough. I have a bowl that is about twice the size of my dough. I have sprayed it with nonstick cooking spray. And I have a proof setting on my oven. So my oven will be proof to about 100 degrees. And I've allowed that to come to temperature. If you do not have a proof box, just put your dough in a warm place. So what you're gonna do is, you're gonna flip it in that bowl, you're gonna wipe it, flip it over so the grease side is up, and you're gonna cover it. Non-stick cooking spray in there, or butter or oil, and then cover it with plastic wrap, real tight, because we really want to build up that heat. I'm going to wash my hands. You're trying to really get that warm in there. And when you undergo fermentation, there's some heat that's given off by that yeast. And you're going to get some beautiful, beautiful carbon dioxide bubbles getting stuck in that dough. That dough should double in size in 1 hour. So you're going to leave it in your proofed area for 1 hour. So I'm going to put it in. Our dough is almost done proofing, like 1 more minute left. And now we're going to get our filling ready. Now, fillings are made in many different ways. Sometimes people brush, melted butter and all sorts of things on their rolled out dough. I like to put the butter in with the filling, so it's just one big smear and really easy to do. So I have 3/4 cup of dark brown sugar. I like the dark caramelized taste. It's really, really yummy. 2 tablespoons of ground cinnamon. Don't be skimpy on the cinnamon. And what I'm going to do is just mix this up. You can whisk it or just mix it up. Sometimes I just do it with my fingers. So just mix that cinnamon up. Oh, you can really smell it. It smells really good. And then I have 1 stick of very soft butter. And I'm just going to mash that together. All right. Oh, let's get really crazy. Let's do it with our hands. Oh. So just mash it up. So just almost like you're making a streusel topping, just get all that beautiful sugar, that dark brown sugar in your cinnamon in there. And it should look almost like a dough. You know what I mean? But it's just butter and that sugar and cinnamon. Yum. And then we're going to slather it and we're going to spread it with an offset spatula. So we're going to make about a dozen of cinnamon rolls, and I like to put them next to each other so they sort of get cozy. Some people bake them, and I used to do this, but I don't know, I'm getting used to, instead of having edges that are baked independently, putting cinnamon rolls down independently, I now like to have them sort of touching each other so they get soft and yummy. So I am going to have to wash my hands real quick. So that looks delicious. If you want to do your filling ahead of time, you can. Make sure you leave it at room temperature. You don't want that butter to get hard. Dough is done. Go into the oven to go get it. We got a little puff. A little puff in the plastic wrap here, which means our fermentation process works. The yeast is good. You can see we got a lot of trapped carbon dioxide in there, and you're not going to punch anything down. What you're going to do is, oh, I can smell it. It smells so beautiful. You're just going to let it ever so gently fall out of the bowl. I find if people mess too much with their dough, it tightens the gluten and makes it harder to shape. So you notice it's sort of puffy and full of carbon dioxide. So what I'm going to use is my knuckles, and I'm just going to push it out a little bit and get it into a squarish rectangular shape. All right, if you can see that. We want a 13 by 18 inch rectangle. So we want preferably the 13 this way. So I'm going to roll. And if you see any weird shapes, gently shape your dough. Let your dough know that you want a rectangle. Rectangle is the shape of the day, dough. Okay, you got to show your dough who's boss. All right? Because sometimes it's not a rectangle. Sometimes you want a circle. Sometimes you want something else. So I'm going to get it out there, and we're going to see We don't have 13 yet. We have almost 13. And we want, actually we want 18 this way. Oh my goodness, I forgot. 18, 13 this way. I forgot. I want to make a good amount of cinnamon rolls. Okay, so 18 this way. Here we go. 18. All right, and you want as perfect a rectangle as you can get. And you want it as even as you can get. So sort of nudge it. See what I'm doing, nudging it? I have 12 width. So we're gonna go a little bit more this way, 1 inch more. And you notice, what did I not use? I didn't use any flour. Oh, Chef Gail didn't use any flour. If you don't use any flour, your dough will not be as dried out. If you can avoid flour, avoid it. So I have 13. I have 17. Do I hear 18? Do I hear 18? And if you see that it's not totally level, roll to the left side. See how it brings it and evens it out? And then go to the right side. All right? All right. All right. A little more this way and we're there. All right, so now we're gonna smear. I love to smear. So we're going to smear. So you're gonna take your filling and sort of scatter it around. Ooh, I don't wanna forget any filling. And just sort of smear it around. All right. Oh, it's so dark and beautiful because when you cut into those cinnamon rolls, you want to see every layer. And I'm going to show you how to roll this baby up super tight. All right? It's going to be tighter than a bank. All right, tighter than a bank vault. And the tighter it is, the more you're going to have those beautiful, beautiful layers. All right? You can even use your fingers to help you sort of smear. All right? And get it all over. Try to get it right to the ends. And it will tend to sort of thicken up. So make sure you just sort of use your offset and get it to spread. All right? If you like, you might add, I'm a traditionalist, you could add some raisins, or you could add some dried cranberries or cherries or jam first. We gotta have cinnamon sugar, and that's all I like. And my kids, if I ever use anything like raisins or nuts, I was in trouble. It was like I was in major trouble for a while. Mom, we don't like that. I know. You're traditionalists. They like everything the way, just sort of plain and traditional. And there's nothing wrong with that. I sort of don't blame them. I like it too. Some people might even put some ganache, like you could put some ganache on here, and some nuts and cherries. That's how I make my rugelach. My rugelach is like a chocolate cherry rugelach. But these are cinnamon rolls, right? You can't mess with these. All right, so I've covered as much as I can. I think I did pretty good. All right. Now, the big roll. So you want to start closest to you, the largest, longest side. This is your 18-inch side. And you're going to roll and then pull back gently. Gently. If you have somebody to help you, you can be on the left side, they can be on the right side. Sort of two-handed cinnamon rolls. Four-handed cinnamon rolls, I should say, right? And as you see one side sort of bows out or bows out in some way that you don't like, sort of nudge the dough back so that it's perfectly level. All right, so again, roll, pull back. Roll, pull back. Roll, see what I'm doing? Pull back. So you really want to have a giant coil, almost like you're taking your beach towel and rolling it up. I never knew anybody that did that, but some people do. So roll it up, roll up that towel. It's going to be a yummy towel. And roll, if you see the middle's getting really wide, roll back. Remember, we're making layers. Layers is the name of the game with cinnamon rolls. All right, see how I'm doing that? I want everything level. Roll it, roll it, roll it. We're gonna get 12 big fat suckers. And if you see here, it's sort of going in a little. Pull it out to meet the rest of the coil. Pull it out to meet the rest of the coil. Pull, pull, pull. And then go down to the seam and sort of give it a little smackaroo. Don't worry about pinching anything because you're gonna put it down and nothing's gonna happen to it. I use a nice knife. Some people use a bench scraper, but I like a knife when I do this. So you're gonna cut it in half and you're just gonna seesaw it back. And I wanna show you a beautiful thing. You wanna see a beautiful thing? Ah, look at that. Gorgeous. All right. Nice, big, fat ones. And if you do want to make these a little bit bigger, you can cut them a little bit thicker, but they may take a little bit longer to bake. So these are lovely. We're going to try to get as many as we can in this pan. I usually go for about 12. They're going to be separate in the beginning, and then they're going to rise together. All right? I may have an extra one for the chef. What I just happen to have a sheet pan with a piece of parchment paper just ready in case there is an extra one. There isn't always, it depends on my pan. This is a 9 by 13 inch pan, but you can choose a larger rectangular pan if you want. But these are going to expand. So these are big boys. These are big boys. So this is the big league now for the cinnamon rolls. These are about 1 inch to 1.5 inches. So depending on how big you want your big boys and how thick you want your cinnamon rolls, look at that, you will decide how much you will have possibly for the chef and how much you will have in your pan. All right, so you should get at least 12. All right, so 3, 6, 9, and again, they're not touching now, but wait, they're going to get super friendly as they proof again. So the second rise is known as proofing, and that we're going to do for only about 35 minutes. And the reason we do a shorter proofing than some non-sweetened yeast breads is because there's so much sweet in here. There's egg and there's things that are not going to allow the gluten to stretch that much because there's so much, not only fat and sugar and eggs and yummy things, all right, but we really need to make sure that they grow just enough. So I think I'm going to get 2 out of here for the chef. Now, if I really wanted to be a pig, I would keep both of these as one. And then I'm just going to get 3 extra. See, the end is not as pretty, but I'm just going to push it down a little. Now, these are going to be put in my oven again, my proofing oven at about 100 degrees. So between 90 and 100. If you don't have it, I'm going to cover it with plastic wrap that I have sprayed with nonstick cooking spray for about 30 to 35 minutes. They're not going to double in size, so don't worry about it. All right, don't worry about it. I'm going to the oven, see you in 35. So after proofing these for 35 minutes, I took them out of the proofing oven and then turned my oven on to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and I baked them for between 30 and 35 minutes. Now, it's going to depend on your oven. When they bake together and they get friendly like this, sometimes they take a few extra minutes. And if you notice, these actually came out a few minutes earlier because they're separate. So you're not going to get the softness that you would get when they bake together. Now let's make our wonderful frosting. So very easy icing actually. So 2 cups of confectioner's sugar, sift it if it's lumpy. Okay, 1 teaspoon of pure vanilla extract. Now this is the tricky part. Between 2 and 4 tablespoons of milk. You can also use cream, you could use maple syrup, you could use orange juice, lemon juice, whatever you want. You want it to be thick because these are hot. I just took them out of the oven. So I'm only going to put in 2 tablespoons right now, and they're going to get real, it's going to stay thick, but I don't want it to get too thin. So you want it to be spreadable, so we can smear again. We can use that word smear. I'm going to need a 1/3 tablespoon. And then after this, you're going to wing it. You're going to decide how thick, how thin do you want these, this icing, because eventually if it's too thin, it's just going to fall off your cinnamon rolls. I like it nice and thick. All right, so you see how thick it is? I always say, like when I was a kid, we used to have library paste that looked like this. So a little bit thinner than library paste. So I may have to go for the 1/4, but I'm only going to add part of the tablespoon. All right. And we're just about there. Don't go any thinner. I used to have a lot of students that in class, they used to really thin it out too much. You don't want to do that. So you see how beautiful this looks? This is what you want. If you've thinned it out too much, you can always thicken it with sugar, but you don't really want to get to that point. Okay? Whoops. And then just sort of go around, make sure you got all the sugar involved. All right, now this is nice and hot. The icing will spread when it's warm. So I am going to take a little bit of this and just spread, just sort of drizzle, and then I'm going to spread it. If you want to leave it drizzled, that would be pretty too. That's lovely. It is lovely. And we're not going to forget the separate ones on the sheet pan. All right, but I like them to go all over. So just sort of spread the wealth, okay? Make it look really pretty. And this is really, really hot, so they will spread, but you can see how beautiful it looks. Let's do a little bit more. Use a lot or as little as you want. It's up to you. I've never met anybody that said, yeah, I don't want that much. I've never met any human being that really would prefer less icing on their cinnamon roll. But just, if it was thinner, you could drizzle, but what's the fun of drizzling? When you really smear it on. Smear it on. So these have cooled down a little bit. Look how beautiful. Look how beautiful these are. See how it spreads, the warmth spreads them? All right. I hope you make these cinnamon rolls. I hope you enjoy them for a brunch, for a breakfast. I hope you make these with your kids. They are not only delightful and delicious. Oh, I still need my hot mitts. They're spectacular looking. So I hope you become a subscriber. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Take care. Till next time.